Hello everyone, fair warning, I do not speak Mandarin at all, so most of my pronunciations of proper names in this review will be incorrect. I do apologize for that, but I hope that many of you will be able to see past that and actually take a look at the Lego set that I'm here to show you today. This is the latest one from the Lego Architecture Skylines sub-series, and it represents part of the skyline of Shanghai, China. This is a much larger set than most of the skylines have been to date. As a matter of fact, it may be the largest of them. Putting a minifig here for scale, hopefully that'll help you to understand just a little bit. I was definitely taken aback by the price of this at first, but now it makes more sense. The architecture line sets tend to be more expensive because they can be, because they are going more towards adult collectors than most of the sets that Lego makes. But here the size as well and the number of pieces used is pretty significant. You'll see in some of the detail just how many small pieces are used here, not just on the front but also on the back, and how many are stacked up here as well. I'm going to start on the left though with the smallest structures in the set, and in the foreground here this represents Chenghuang Miao Temple. It's a shame that it ends up being represented with so few pieces, but they were trying to keep a pretty good relative scale between the different buildings, as they always do in these Skyline series sets. And behind that, the taller structure is the Longhua Pagoda. Now, neither of these look particularly great or accurate in this tiny scale, but I'm very glad that they included them because they are very important for the connection to the history of the area. Next, representing a couple of the early 20th century Western buildings along the waterfront, we have the HSBC building here and the Customs House, and these two are actually directly next to each other along that waterfront in real life. From a higher angle, you can see the hollowed out plaza space of the HSBC building, and you can also see how they integrated in an approximation of the street and walkway area and the waterfront itself. There's also some texturing around the backs of each of these buildings so they don't look too plain when viewed from behind. Next, the rear view is the clearest and best view of the Radisson Blu Hotel. Now, the Lego version of this has a lot of strong vertical striation, but I think that's broken up a little bit with the visible studs behind these grille pieces in gray, especially with their shadows. It helps to introduce a little bit of the horizontal line and kind of horizontal breakup to show the different floors and their windows a little bit better. Here's how that looks from the front, so it's partially obscured, but you can see it down to the base, down to the ground level from some angles. Next up is the Oriental Pearl Tower, which has the most complex and varied build of any of the structures in this set. I especially appreciate the attention to detail on the ground here. They really tried to build up the terraces, although I feel like perhaps some green is missing from this to show the levels of planted areas. The main tower structure has building right side up and upside down. They alternate back and forth with the use of some bars inside of the structure to help hold it all together. I have a feeling this building took the most time to design because there are many different ways that you could do many of the different components of it. And I'm sure there was a lot of second guessing involved of where to put the magenta. Do you use magenta or do you use red? Do you use that minifig headpiece up here, or do you stack up studs? Just there are a lot of components here that really I'm sure had to be experimented with back and forth many ways. Also, there are missing struts, kind of cross struts that ought to go in here. Was there a way to make that happen? I am certain that the designer spent a lot of time trying different things here, and in the end ended up with something that is immediately recognizable, even if I think looking up close at it you could start to question some of those individual decisions. In mostly medium blue and using exclusively studs on the side construction, this is the Shanghai World Financial Center building. And this is a difficult shape to approximate in this scale, especially in Lego. They have tried to do this shape previously for the One World Trade Center, so they had just a little bit of experience of trying different techniques. And I think this is a fair representation, a fair approximation, a fair way to do it. There aren't too many ways to do it that'll give you such a consistent finish. Now, this does make ample use of 2x3 tiles, which are a relatively new thing to the Lego world, and also lots and lots of 1x3 modified tiles with just 2 studs on top. So just here you can see how you have the 4 stud wide base behind the widest area, then you go to 3 studs wide, then to 2, and then to 1, and all these things are completely tiled off on the front, so you see absolutely no studs. I think that it's a good finished product. Now, the wedge plates that are used behind the cutout there are angled in a bit more than they ought to be, but I think this was about as close as they could reasonably get it in this scale. As you turn the thing around to the side, you can see more of how it tapers towards the top along one dimension, but you may also notice just a little bit of warping forward, and that's just something that always happens with Lego plates. They always tend to pull themselves towards the studded surface, especially when you have a limited number of them that can stack and kind of hold themselves in place. The tapering continues around the back, but does not look nearly as good here where you have so many anti-studs, the undersides of all of these plates and especially jumper pieces. They did bring in a couple of the inverted tiles up here, but to me those just don't help very much with consistency, because that breaks things up and almost makes me wish that it was all just anti-studs that I was seeing, just for consistency from this view. Last up is the very twisty Shanghai Tower, a shape that you wouldn't really expect to see made out of Lego pieces, but that ultimately was approximated with fairly simple kind of brute force techniques. When it comes down to it, you're looking at essentially a huge stack of these pieces. They're just horizontal, so some of the faces are flat, and then one of the faces is rounded like so, and they just use some of these flexible parts inside and then just ultimately twist the thing around. It goes through a couple of 90-degree twists, and that's pretty much it. There is a section here that doesn't have any twist to it. I mean, there's a very slight amount that you can kind of force into it, but it tries to stay completely flat. So that's just a little bit off, but if you're not looking for it, if you're not looking at just the right angle, you probably won't notice that. And plus, you know, a lot of these individual segments will have slightly different offsets, so you know, you can kind of drive yourself crazy trying to make this look as perfect as possible. But from any kind of normal distance to normal observers, I'd say it looks pretty dang good. I also think they did a pretty good job of finishing off the top with a little bit of flair, a little bit of unique shaping up there. That includes the use of a couple of old Bionicle Bow Rock eyes, these pieces have been known as, in just a regular dark gray. I want to get a lot of those. I have a feeling that you will be seeing many of those in custom builds in the future, not just in architecture related things, but all kinds of stuff. It's just a very useful piece, and it's nice to get it in such a generic color. And that does it for this one. This is my personal new favorite Skyline series set from LEGO Architecture, although it's not particularly fair given how large this is. You know, it's not entirely fair to compare it directly against the others, but I like the varying techniques, and I think that it just looks really nice on display. It's a little bit strange that they have this setup with basically going from shortest to tallest, or vice versa, but I think that the positions are well chosen, and the representation that's here is pretty good. I'm sure that many people could have suggested other buildings to be placed in here, but I understand why they chose each of these for an architectural study, and also giving homage to the different ages of different portions of the waterfront and the main downtown area. But ultimately, this was a fun Lego set to put together. The price to part ratio is surprisingly fine. It's just a little expensive feeling for the volume of stuff that you get when it's completed, because so much of it uses small details, small pieces, and ends up with fairly dense builds, especially for the two on the right. That's it for my look at this one. Hope you enjoyed the little tour. I'll talk to you again soon. Thanks for watching.